Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and I have been a video nerd my entire life, and I really got going when I was 13 when I got my first VHS camcorder. So I've got a pile of tapes that I recorded back then, and then as time progressed I switched into different formats, and of course that led me into digital video around 1998 or so, and I recorded a lot of stuff on these MiniDV tapes. In fact, I have a whole bin full of tapes that I've been meaning to capture for quite some time. And MiniDV was a digital format. So even though it used tapes, the video was stored digitally. And if you can capture the video digitally from the camcorder, you don't lose any quality as you move the video from one device to another. So my plan today is to start capturing some of this DV footage and get a one-to-one copy on my computer, and then I can of course store that in the NAS and back it up and all the other good stuff that you might want to do with old video. Now, I recorded a lot of this video on this camcorder. This is the Sony TRV-900. This was a real hot ticket back in its day. It was so good that Sony kept it on the market for a number of years. It was pretty much a broadcast quality camera. It had a 3-chip sensor. The video looked spectacular on this, especially on a CRT. Had a really nice color screen that would pop out here, and it would take digital still images with a floppy drive that would attach through a PC card slot here on the back, a PC MCIA card slot. So this thing was really a neat product to play around with, and I've got a ton of footage that it recorded. The problem, though, is that this doesn't play the tapes back at all anymore. So that is an issue. I haven't been able to use this to actually capture any footage or record anything new. But I got about 10 years of active use out of this camera, primarily because the visual quality was so good that there was nothing better to upgrade to. It was just like the pinnacle of standard definition video. But around 2008 or so, I picked up this camera. This is a high definition version of the DV format called HDV. So it uses the same tapes, but can record at 1080i, and it also was backwards compatible with the standard definition format, and it was transferring video to the computer in the same way using Firewire, which we'll talk about more in a minute. This camera, unfortunately, though, no longer plays back tapes either, so I've been kind of out of luck. But a friend of mine let me borrow this thing. This is the HDR FX7. It is overkill for what we're doing here, but this has a functional HDV deck on board that can read the tapes that I recorded with both of these cameras, and this is what's going to be our primary capture device. Now, I'm going to be using my Mac here for a majority of the capturing today. This is the MacBook Air with the M1 chip. The reason is that Apple has more DV stuff built into the operating system than Microsoft has in Windows at the moment. And also, Macs are easier to interface with Firewire, which I will talk more about when we get to connecting everything up. But we will experiment with my Windows laptop towards the end of the video, because there are some freeware applications out there that will allow some rudimentary video capture from these devices so you can get the footage off and safely stored. But again, I think it's going to be easier and less aggravating on the Mac side. So let's get into this now, and I do want to let you know before we do that in the interest of full disclosure, everything that we're looking at today I paid for with my own funds, minus the camcorder that my buddy lent me. All of the opinions you're about to hear are my own. No one is paying for this review, nor is anyone reviewing or approving what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now, starting with the Firewire connection. All right, let's start off with the camera connection here, and on the back of this camera is a Firewire port, and this is the only way, to my knowledge, that you can bring in digital video from one of these camcorders without capturing just the analog output. And I've got a Firewire cable here that I've had for many years that we're going to plug into the back of the camera. My old Sony here, of course, has one of those ports as well. Let me just move this one out of the way so you can see where that port is, right down there. And again, that's the only way we can get this video out. And the tricky thing is that Firewire is a technology that you're not going to find on current PCs. You can still buy adapter cards for desktop computers, but on laptops it's a lot trickier. So to get this to work, what we're going to be using are a few adapters from Apple, and these should work on my Thunderbolt-equipped PC as well. The first adapter here is their Thunderbolt to Firewire adapter. There are no USB to Firewire adapters out there at all. So this is kind of like your only option at the moment if you're just hooking up to a laptop. And of course, the laptop has to have a Thunderbolt connector. So this is the back end of it where we're going to plug in the other side of this Thunderbolt cable. This is a Firewire 800 connector, which is a little different than the connector that came out with the first version of Firewire. So you might need to get a new cable if you don't have a cable that looks like this on the other end of your camcorder cable. But you'll notice that the port here is the older Thunderbolt style, what they used in Thunderbolt 1 and 2. So to make this work, we're going to have to use another connector here, which is Apple's Thunderbolt 1 and 2 to Thunderbolt 3 connector. And this will make this adapter work with my modern Mac that has the Thunderbolt 3 connection on it. And remember, we're talking about Thunderbolt here, so if we were to plug this into a USB Type-C port, it's not going to work. It's got to be a USB-C port that has Thunderbolt on board, otherwise you're out of luck. And then we're going to attach the cable here to the back of that Firewire adapter. So we've got this monstrosity connected here. Let's plug it into the Mac and see what happens. All right, we got the Mac loaded up, the camera is queued up, and the cable is plugged in. We've got that Firewire cable, of course, on the end of this crazy adapter going on here. We're going to plug in that Thunderbolt connector. And my intent here initially is to keep this as simple as possible because this has a lot of depth that you can fall into with it to get the best results. I'm going to go for the quickest and the simplest, and then we'll talk about perhaps some more advanced topics in a future video. But I will show you a few things to consider when you're going through this process. Now, I have the QuickTime player here loaded up on my Mac, and you may not know that in addition to being a player, the QuickTime application can also be a recorder. And I'm going to go over here to New Movie Recording, the first option. And what this will do is pull up my webcam. But check this out. Because we have the camera connected, let me zoom in on the screen here a little bit. We can click on this little arrow next to the record icon and check it out. There's an option for an HDV VCR, which is the camera. And then what I'm also going to do here is select the HDV VCR for the audio source. And now, if I go over to the camera and press play, watch what happens. We get the image here of a truck that's on that tape. And I'm going to hit the record button here, and it's going to start recording this video onto the hard drive. So we're going to let this run for a second as the truck rolls by, and then we'll have it cut to another scene. But there we go. There's the truck driving away, and it looks good. Again, this is coming in live over the tape. So this is not some digital transfer off a card. It's actually playing back the tape. We've got the break room here from my old office when I was working just out of college, and there we go. So I'm going to hit stop there, and now what I'm going to do is save the file. So let's jump back to my Mac screen here, hit Command S, and I'm just going to throw this on the desktop and say Capture Test 1, give it a name of some kind. And now, let me hit the stop button on the camera here, and now what I've got is a file, a QuickTime file, that I can load up and play back and check it out. Looks pretty good. It looks pretty close to what we recorded. It looks like it actually de-interlaces the video as it is bringing it in, or it could very well just be de-interlacing it via software playback here, but it all looks pretty good. And again, this is not quite a one-to-one copy from the camera, but it is pretty darn close because it brought in that video digitally, and we were not capturing the video using analog cables. So this is a very pure, almost again, one-to-one copy off the camera. Now what it does is it will save it in a codec that might be a little more universal than the native DV codec that brought it in. So this is coming in at H.264 versus the native DV. And it looks like the data rate here is about 4 megabits per second or so. Remember, this is standard definition video, so you're not going to really need that much of a bit rate for a good result. Now there's another quality setting though. Let's take a look at that. All right, so we're back on our QuickTime screen here, and I'm going to pull down that selection arrow that we did before. I'm going to leave the HDV VCR here selected so we still capture from the camera, but I'm going to move the quality from high to maximum, and we're going to begin the playback again here. So I'll hit play on the camera and record on QuickTime, and there's our truck again. Now this is probably not going to look all that different to you from the standpoint of this YouTube video, and that's because we are, of course, recompressing this video for you to watch later. But I'm just going to hit the stop button here just so we can see what the differences are. So we'll hit stop, and if I pull up the information about this file, what you'll notice here is that the codec it's using is different. So instead of H.264, the quality setting here will have it record in the ProRes 422 format. And this is Apple's native format that they typically use in Final Cut Pro for editing. So if you are intending to bring in this footage to edit, that setting is probably the one you want to do because the video won't have to be re-encoded to bring into your editor. So it will be, of course, a higher bit rate, but that's because ProRes typically is not quite lossless, but a close to lossless kind of compression, and the bit rates are much, much higher with ProRes, but again, better for editing. One other thing to note is that the native resolution of this DV video should be 720 by 480. And I was reading up on this a bit, and this 704 by 480 is still compliant, and it shouldn't make any difference for editing purposes, but just make note of that if you happen to see that when you bring things in. I haven't seen any difference between video brought in this way and a video brought in another method, which we're going to take a look at now using iMovie. All right, so here is iMovie, and of course iMovie is free and comes with your Mac. If we go over here to the File menu and select Import Media, our DV cam will show up right here. And what I can do is click on Import and bring in the video of the truck again. Now, I'm going to let this run past this scene because I want to show you what iMovie will do when you're bringing in video that has multiple scenes like this. So here you saw we went from the truck to the coffee maker in the break room. I'm going to hit stop here and also stop on the player. And if I jump out of this window here, you can see that it brought in actually two different clips because it treats every start and stop of the camcorder that you did 20 years ago as a separate video file, much in the same way our cell phones work today. You record a video clip, that sits in its own space, and then the next clip that you record is in its own space as well. It's not just one long continuous thing. So if you want the one long continuous thing, QuickTime is the way to do it. If you use iMovie or Final Cut Pro, both will bring in each start and stop of the camcorder as its own clip. Now, if I were to go and start editing something here in iMovie, what you're going to notice is that it stretches the video out. So the original file here, as you can see, is a square 4:3 aspect ratio, but the edit project that we're doing is 16:9. And this, of course, is not ideal because the video was not shot in this aspect ratio, and you'll probably lose some information and things will get all spread out. So if you really want to edit this, you're probably going to have to go to Final Cut Pro or some other editing software that you might have to pay for, because it doesn't look like iMovie will let you edit in 4:3 mode to keep things simple, unfortunately. But there is a reason to consider iMovie as your capture software, because it really does preserve a one-to-one image of what is on the tape. It'll be the same codec, the same aspect ratio, it'll be an interlaced video file, and it will have the very same resolution too. And if we go over to my hard drive here, I'll show you where iMovie stores those files. So we're going to load up my Finder here and click on my home directory. And we're going to go to Movies. And this iMovie library is where iMovie stores all of my data for that application. And if I use two fingers and click, essentially a right click on the Mac, I'm going to have an option here to show package contents. And the project file I was working on was called My Movie, just the default here. And I'm going to dive into that folder. And inside of that folder is another folder here called Original Media. And inside of it, look, here's the two files that we captured. And if I load one of these up and we go over to the information panel here on QuickTime by hitting Command-I, you'll see that it captured in the DV codec. We've got the original aspect ratio, of course, the original resolution. This, for all intents and purposes, is a one-to-one of what was stored on the tape. And if you were looking to archive that exactly as it was recorded, this is going to be the best way to do it if you don't want to buy any additional software. Now, you can copy the files out of the directory just like any other file. Just note, though, that if your iMovie library exists on your internal hard drive here and you drag the files, for example, to your desktop, it's going to move them out of the iMovie directory and screw up your project if you were intending to edit in iMovie with it. So what you can do instead is hold down the Option key, and that will make a copy of the files instead of moving them. And if you're using Final Cut, it's a very similar process here. You can click on the library file, go to Show Package Contents, and then you can dive into your event and into your original media folder to find those two captured videos. So I really like this idea of bringing in the original file format from the tape and archiving it, because you know you've got the best unaltered copy you can get short of the tape itself. The only risk you have is that at some point Apple on the Mac side and Microsoft on the Windows side might decide to drop DV, and if they do drop DV, you won't be able to work with those files again. But hopefully if they decide to do that, you'd have enough notice to transfer them to something else. And I think it's good to, again, have that original format, because as video upscaling technology improves in the future, starting with the original file is always the best way to go. As they say in the video business, garbage in, garbage out, and you want the best quality to start with. Now, I did find an application that's not free that was rather interesting to me. This is called LifeFlix. And what this does is it will grab your DV camcorder, rewind the tape, and bring in the entire thing. It does separate things out into individual clips, but you have the option to combine them. So for example, if I wanted to combine these two here, I can hold down Shift and select the other clip here, and then click Combine. And what I like about this is that it preserves the original file format, and you can choose where it stores the data. So if we go over here to my Finder window, you can see those two clips I just combined are here now as one file, and it preserved the DV codec here as the codec. So it really just brought those two files together as opposed to actually re-encoding them. Now they also have a feature that will upconvert the video to HD, but that's kind of problematic because when you do this, it destroys the original file and it will leave you only with the upconverted one. It will preserve the aspect ratio and it will bring it up to 1080p, but you have no control over exactly how that file is created. You can't adjust the bit rate, the interlacing, it just kind of has a default setting and that's it. So I think the value for LifeFlix is that you can bring in all those individual clips, you can merge together the clips that you want to have as a single clip, and then archive those files when you're done with it. And again, I like the fact that it will allow you to store those files anywhere, including on external media or even network drives too. Pretty cool stuff. Now the LifeFlix software is not cheap. It's about $100 at the time I'm recording this video, but I do think there's a good value proposition here for people like me with a box full of tapes to convert, because you can pop a tape in, walk away, come back, combine the clips you want, archive them, and move on to the next tape. And that, to me, has some value. One thing I noticed as I was poking around on their website was that when I downloaded the free trial that we were running there a second ago, when I added it to my cart, it made me an offer. It said $15 off if you buy right now. So I think I might load up another web browser and take them up on that. So not perfect, but I think it'll get me the archive that I'm looking for. So I think that's ultimately what I'm going to do to bring in this footage, both from my standard definition DV footage and my high definition HDV footage that I've got in the box over there. Let's take a look at Windows now. All right, so I've got my gaming laptop hooked up now, and the reason why we're using this laptop is that this is the only Windows machine I own with a Thunderbolt connector. But it did detect all of these Apple adapters without any drivers necessary. It actually was pretty seamless. And for standard definition video, there's a free piece of software called WinDV, which I just loaded up here. I'll put a link to this down in the video description. And the way it works here is you hit play on the camera, and just like before, it'll project that image into the computer screen, and then I can click capture and begin recording the file in its original codec, a lot like what we saw with iMovie and LifeFlix. And it's going to save this file as an AVI on my folder here that I assigned to it. You can pretty much choose anywhere you want those files to go. And I'm just going to let it switch scenes here real quick. And now I'm going to stop the capture process and stop the camcorder. And now, as you can see here, I've got two files that it brought in. in AVI format. And just like iMovie, it separates them based on the scene that it recorded. So here's the truck coming in here. Again, this is native format, so that looks pretty good. And then I can switch over to the break room file here also. And we didn't have to stop the tape here. It detected that shift in the timestamp and knew that we had recorded a separate clip. And I just pulled up one of the files in VLC so you can see how it encoded the file. And again, we're dealing with native DV video here, so this is a good candidate to be archived. Now for high definition HDV footage, there's another Windows app you gotta grab. This one is called HDV Split. And this actually has some camera controls on it too, so I can actually hit the play button here and that will get the camera to start playing. There is a preview window, but it hasn't been working, even though I installed some extra codecs that it needed, so that's a little buggy. But if you click on the record button here, what this is going to do is capture the video footage to the hard drive, just like we were doing with the other application a minute ago. And then as you can see, it's also detecting scene changes as we're bringing that footage in. And you have the option to split that into multiple files with this application or just keep them as one single file. I'm going to click stop here and let's take a look and see what it recorded. All right, so we've got two files here that it captured, these M2T files, but it all looks pretty good. So I think that captured successfully. I'm going to jump over to VLC here and let's take a look at the details of the file. So let's zoom back in here. Now you'll notice that the resolution is 1440 by 1080, and that's because this HDV format is anamorphic. So when you drop it into editing software, it looks normal at 1920 by 1080, but if you play the file raw on a player that doesn't know to stretch it out, it'll look a little squished. That's just the nature of the HDV codec, and that's actually a good thing because it captured exactly what it should have, which was, of course, the native file. HDV uses the MPEG-2 compression versus the DV codec, so that's why this is an MPEG-2 video here. But as far as I can see, this is a native capture, and that is a good thing. And by the way, on the Mac side, if we were to use LifeFlix or iMovie, we would see the same results on that platform too. Now you do have the option to disable scene splitting here if you want, so you can turn that off and get one continuous file. And it looks like this is a pretty good way of capturing that high definition footage off of DV tape on the Windows side. So you do have some options with Windows to do what we just did on the Mac, which is great. And the odd thing here is that you do it with Apple hardware plugged into your Windows computer. So it looks like it's pretty simple and free to grab the native files off of your tapes on both Windows and the Mac. On the Mac side, everything we demoed with the standard definition video will also work for high definition video too. So it's going to be something that I'm going to start embarking on over the next couple of weeks to get all those tapes archived in their original format. And then I'll figure out what to do with the video after that. So I'd love to get some feedback from all of you on upscaling software out there that we should look at. I was playing around with Handbrake for a little while as well, because all of this video, both the high def and the low def stuff, is going to come in interlaced. So I'll want some options for having it look the best on my 4K TV, for example. So we'll probably be coming back to this topic. I'll be interested to see how interested all of you are in it. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. And until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, Tom Albrecht, Jim Callagher, Hot Sauce and Video Games, and Brian Parker. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/S.